U.S. President Barack Obama is casting Russian aggression in Ukraine as a threat to peace in Europe. In a gesture meant to reassure Baltic leaders, Obama stopped in Estonia ahead of this week's NATO summit. CCTV's Jessica Stone has more.
U.S. President Barack Obama touched down in Estonia Wednesday on a mission of reassurance. With NATO releasing satellite evidence of Russian troops inside eastern Ukraine, Baltic state leaders are concerned about a Russian threat inside their own borders, where Russian-speaking populations live.
Today, what's happening on Ukraine soil, the open aggression from Russian side against sovereign country, means that there is an attack not only against Ukraine, it is an attack against the peace and borders of Europe after Second World War.
President Obama addressed those concerns in a speech directed at the Estonian people ahead of the NATO summit in Wales.
Let's also be clear where we stand. Just as we never accepted the occupation and illegal annexation of the Baltic nations, we will not accept Russia's occupation and illegal annexation of Crimea or any part of Ukraine.
While the U.S. president backed the creation of a rapid reaction force of 4,000 NATO troops to respond to European hotspots and pledged to increase the number of American troops rotating through the Baltics, he made no mention of supporting a U.S. or NATO military response to alleged Russian activities inside Ukraine. Instead, he suggested the alliance would work on additional sanctions against Russia, which he says are forcing the country to pay a price. Former U.S. Ambassador to NATO Kurt Volker says that price isn't heavy enough.
I think in order to really stop Russia in Ukraine, we need to put military response on the table so that there becomes a real fair fight and the Ukrainians can take their territory back.
And what should that military response look like in your estimation?
Well, first off, it's got to be the Ukrainians leading in taking their own territory back, which they are willing to do. Then you need to provide intelligence support to the Ukrainians, trainers for the military forces.
On the eve of the summit, France announced it is suspending the delivery of one of 2 French-built warships to Russia. French President François Hollande cited concerns over Moscow's alleged role in Ukraine, but stopped short of canceling the $1.6 billion contract. But at the moment, there is no indication the NATO alliance is willing to send troops to the Ukrainian region.
If the problem is Russia invading Ukraine, NATO ought to be doing something about Russia invading Ukraine. And that's going to take some American leadership, and it's going to take a strategy that brings all of NATO together to help the Ukrainians.
The most likely approach by NATO could be targeted sanctions of particular Russian industries along the lines of what the U.S. has done. Since Europe stands to pay a heavier economic price, another possibility may be a country-by-country set of penalties against Russia rather than unified EU sanctions. Jessica Stone, CCTV, Washington.